Hello, welcome to Man Beal, and this will be part two on my deconstruction of this particular bit of monistic idealism's video interviewing. Yeah, you could call it an interview, right? A 4 hour long speech by their priest, right? Because the major, if I can find the, sorry about that, find the timestamps here. I was dealing with the 126.34 Nathan Hawkins objections to analytic idealism, and that's the objections I'm interested in. Right? Analytic idealism closer to truth. That could be an interesting truth. I mean, I have never seen anybody come up with a good definition of truth. Right? I have never. It's all over the place. I mean, it might be somebody up who'd actually made a complete... And when people try to define things, a definition has to be a direct reference to an ontology. At least within a few steps at least, right? Back to some... And even back to a base where you can trace... You can't just throw a word at it and then throw a new word at that word and a new word at that word that threw a new word at that word, and you're an infinite regress of definitions of words, right? So the words have to at some point directly reference back to an ontology. That's the problem. Nobody has an ontology that has direct reference to the meaning of the terms used. As long as there isn't that, there is no philosophy, basically, in the sense that whatever word you're using, it's just grabbed out of your ass, basically, from a philosophically rigid approach, right? You can't just grab a word and throw it at me and say, now I defined it, right? Because then I would say, okay, there's a new word there. Okay, how do you find that word, right? I mean, it's an old problem that I've come up with before, which is, and I'm rambling a bit on the idea of truth here, but let me take it. If I define truth, then I'm implying that truth needs a definition. But what about the words I use in order to define truth? Don't they need a definition? If they need a definition, then I can go on in infinite regress of defining terms used to define. In an infinite regress back to somewhere we lost contact with what we're doing, possibly, right? Or if they don't need definition, those words are used to define truth. Why didn't I use those terms rather than truth that actually needed a definition in order to be used? Right? So either you are using truth as a weaker term because it needs a definition, and only when I punked you for giving me a definition of the term, then you coughed up the definition of the term, and then saying those terms are used to define with don't need further definition, then they must be a stronger description of what you're doing when you're referring to truth. Then why didn't you use that rather than truth, right? So they must need it implies that they must also need a definition, and then you're back in that infinite regress of definition or definitional terms used. And that's where all philosophy usually are stranding. It's on defining and use of terms and their meaning, the semantics and all this, right? Because if it's not clear what you're talking about, you can actually take advantage of using terms with a particular semantic, right? Like when Bernardo Kastrup says dashboard. Dashboard is that which implies there's something beyond it in the cockpit, right? So people are groomed by the use of the term to have a particular understanding. And Bernardo Kastrup doesn't even need to argue for why there is an external world, because he dragged in the term dashboard, right? That's why I don't like this kind of manipulative use of terms without fucking clear grounding, right? I'm not saying that all my ramblings here in my deconstructions and so on are all very securely grounded, but I'm merely pointing out that other people are not grounded in their philosophy, and it also hones my need to be even more grounded in my own philosophy, so to say, right? All of this, somebody commented on a video of mine recently that says he likes my rants, But maybe it's time to move on from Bernardo Kastrup, right? And I understand where you're coming from, right? It seems like I'm obsessed with Bernardo Kastrup, right? But first of all, if you are sort of a little concerned about my emphasis on Bernardo Kastrup, show me somebody else who's dealing with these kinds of levels of philosophy in a same kind of all-encompassing manner as Bernardo Kastrup is doing, and actually trying to take a stab at it. I don't think Bernardo Kastrup is particularly good at it, though he's very eloquent in his use of words, and that sort of covers up the shortcomings of it, to some extent at least, because people would rather have somebody saying things nicely that aren't necessarily good philosophy than very rigid and strong philosophy that is presented by somebody who's maybe not as smooth as Bernardo Kastrup, right? The smoothiness is usually what makes the bad medicine go down, right? So show me somebody else. I'll be happy to deconstruct and comment on somebody who's really. It has to be. I have to have a sense that it's somebody who's actually attempting to doing something, and in the same manner as Bernardo Kastrup is doing. And it's not. I'm not trying to sweet talk his philosophy, but he is trying. The only two I have identified so far who actually tries to go this deep, but with little success, is Bernardo Kastrup, and to a much worse degree, I must admit, Stefan Molyneux, right? Stefan Molyneux tries to do metaphysics and ethics and epistemology and all of it, right? Bernardo Kastrup does very much ontology / metaphysics and nothing else, right? He doesn't do epistemology, doesn't do ethics, right? He only appeals to it now and then, where he sort of tells people what to do and not to do, right? Which is bullshit, because he hasn't done the sufficient philosophy to justify those statements, right? But mostly when I see people on YouTube, for instance, right? They're basically more custodians of other people's philosophy rather than presenting their own philosophy, and that is the point. I don't want to, unless it's something like somebody trying to violate Hume's Isord gap, right? I'll jump on that, because that's a big one for me, right? But maybe beyond that, and a few other examples, maybe, right? I don't want somebody lecturing me about Immanuel Kant, for instance, or somebody lecturing me about Nietzsche or whatever, right? I don't care about that Nietzsche and Kant, Schopenhauer in that sense. I care about your philosophy, right? So if somebody is presenting their philosophy and it is an attempt on doing it rigidly from a ground floor and some, if not all the way up to whatever end goal, right? I'm on board. I'm listening, right? There aren't that many of them, because they're all sitting in their little trench pet subject like panpsychism or illusionism or whatever ism, right? Or scientism and so on, right? They're all sitting, but they have a little pet subject, and it's, to some degree, it's the same. It's the case with Bernardo Kastrup. He's just dealing with something very fundamental, and that's why I'm interested, right? I don't care panpsychism or illusionism. It's just all sorts of trying to find an excuse for why there is no hard problem or something like that, right? So they can keep doing what they are doing already, right? Not disclosing an ultimate proto-metaphysics / ontology without disclosing it, but trying to refute criticism of the hard problem so they can stay with whatever they're doing that is not disclosed. I don't care about that, right? At least Bernardo Kastrup is disclosing his philosophy very clearly. It's not particularly good, but at least he's doing that, right? Okay, so enough of that. Let's get back into the video and let me see how it goes, right? So,
there will be correlations between the behavior of different diodes on your dashboard that will still allow you to coherently theorize about the dynamics of the external world. Now, you have to take that theorizing with a grain of salt. I grant that. But I do not grant that because all we have is the dashboard and no transparent window to see the world as it actually is, that because of that, then all theorizing is hopeless. No, I think that goes too far. Because representations, although they don't show you the world as it is, they are supposed to convey accurate and actionable information about the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been useful to survival. And the argument is precisely that they are useful to.
But all he's talking about here, it implies to me that he cannot stick to his own philosophy. He cannot stick to his own rules, right? He very clearly set up the idea that there is a dashboard that you have access to, and then you can be meta-consciously aware of, so to say. And what you can be aware of is what is on that dashboard. But he says without disclosing how he gets to it, he says there's something outside the dashboard. Let's go with that. Let's say he has stated that as an axiom, right? Then he goes and says that is completely different from the dashboard. But now he says, okay, but but I'm bringing in science. Now I'm going to theorize about how it moves about and does this and looks like that as sort of an implied indication of what is going on beyond the dashboard, right? So it's like he has special access. He is sort of a magical creature. Is an exception from his own rules of what can be done, right? If you're talking about metaphysics, you are not talking about the dashboard, right? There is nothing about the dashboard, in my opinion, that enables you to say anything about an external world. And first of all, he needs to clarify how he gets from the dashboard to the idea of an external world, right? Because if he has just conjured up an external world that is independent of the dashboard, then I don't care about his external world, right? I don't care about his philosophy, basically, right? You could say I could care about his ontology, about the dashboard, because it's independent of his external world. But I wouldn't care about his external world, at least, right? Because it's independent of everything I have access to, apparently, and he has access to. So it's pure imagination, right? So if there's dependency, show me the dependency, give me the argument. There is no argument, as pointed out in my list here, right? He never gives an argument. He has no argument for an external world other than it's given, right? What access is that? At this level of philosophy, you cannot just bring shit in like that, right? It's as I to fabulate a bit about why he does it. He has not become fully released himself of materialism, right? He has rejected that his experiences is a one-to-one, a naive kind of whatever representation, right? Direct or indirect, whatever it is he thought of as a materialist. He has found out it's paradoxical, right? It's contradictory, whatever. But he keeps the idea of that external world, though he says all I have access to is my dashboard. Then in that step, he would implicitly be saying, because I've rejected my old thinking, I also rejecting the foundations of that thinking. That foundation of the thinking was the appeal to a given external world. That's why I thought that my direct experiences was the actual direct external world. Then he has to get rid of the external world, and if he wants it back, he has to establish how he gets it back. That's what he doesn't do. He just say it's given. Because it used to be when he was a materialist, right? Doesn't work.
To survival. If you close your eyes and your ears and you go for a stride in the city, for a stroll in the city, chances are you'll be run over by a car. You don't want that. It's very useful to have your eyes open and your ears
I think
as well.
I'm sort of, there's something about the timestamps that is not right here. I thought I was. I think I have to go a little ahead here.
Correlate with the states of the world in a way that allows for fruitful theorizing. I think to deny that and is also to deny the very spirit.
I think I have misread where I was in my last video, so I need to forward wind a bit here to not repeat what I did in the last video.
Relevant things about the structure and dynamics of the world. They are not the same structure and dynamics as the representation, but the representation is telling you things that do correlate with the structure and dynamics of the world. So you can coherently and fruitfully theorize through the intermediation of the representations.
All right. I definitely appreciate you commenting on that, Bernardo. This is idealists. We all are on the same team. We're all idealists. But I know that this is a topic. It's like an in-house debate between the idealists, and it's a friendly, constructive debate. And I really like hearing you add to that. So this next section we're going to get into here, it's about the fallibility of our minds. So this short question here, I guess, that you could ask is color perception an illusion?
I think this was where we. I'm sorry if I screwed it up. I think this is where we got in the first video.
Under analytic idealism, or just do you think idealism in general?
I need to hear the question
Idealism,
again.
or
I need to hear this one.
Is color perception an illusion under analytic idealism, or just do you think idealism in general?
Again, is this use of terms? Do those terms need a definition? And now they, and it is also a problem when discussing this, because it ends up being the discussing about the meaning of the terms rather than actually getting to a solution of anything, because they need to be in an agreement of what they're talking. And he's very likely going to say something, yeah, but it depends on how you define an illusion. An illusion has to be something you experience in order to call it an illusion, and so on. And you go into all these epicycles of meaning, right? Let's hear it. Oh, maybe I should try to answer the question before Bernardo Kastrup does, right? Let me hear it again.
Is color perception an illusion under analytic idealism, or just do you think idealism in general?
Color perception, well, so it's sort of a cart before the horse. Do you perceive color, or is perception responsible for the creation of color? What is color, right? And it's important, because what the questioner or the person asking the question is concerned about is that he doesn't deal with colors really in his ontology, right? Because they wouldn't ask the question if it's very clear in his ontology how it's supposed to be understood. No, he just called all of it dashboard, right? And thereby bringing in the idea of an external world just by using the term dashboard. Because, as I said before, dashboard means there's something beyond the dashboard, right? It wouldn't be called a dashboard if there wasn't something out there. So because I'm calling it a dashboard, there must be something out there. Or at least I want you to think that way, right? That's the sophistry of his presentation. He probably doesn't consider it sophistry, right? He probably thinks it's good reasoning, but it isn't. Well, you can't explain color, right? Shit. Because, in my opinion, how would you explain? Let's take an example. How would you explain yellow? Explain yellow for me, right? Define yellow. Of course, without saying yellow, or without referring to some concept that has yellowness, right? Like banana. Well, it's a color of banana. Well, then you take the step ahead with a cognition called banana, and then try to step back in order to... That's circular, right? You're violating the base of your ontology. You can't use something, in my opinion, which is level B. Cognitions are level B. They are there because of colors and sound and taste and so on, right? But mainly colors, I would think. That's why you have banana. If there wasn't any colors, there wouldn't be any bananas either, right? There probably wouldn't anything at all. That's why, to me, that colors and sounds and taste, the qualia, are the 5 constituents of the base, right? Because you can't explain them. You can't explain color. It's impossible. You can only do it by referring to some proto-ontology and saying that's an explanation of the color. You can't do that. Because all you have access to, imaginations, cognitions, abstractions, theories, whatever you can come up with, are there because of the colors and sounds and tastes, right? But let's stick to color as a representation of qualia. Color is foundational. Therefore, it has no explanation. It has no definition. You can't get any deeper, right? That's why it has to be the base, in my opinion. If somebody's trying to explain color, they are violating their own thinking because they are appealing to some proto-ontology that explains that thing that is on the next level ontology, right? If I'm talking about, but it's a wave. It's a particular wavelength. No. I only have the idea of wavelengths because I have color, right? Because I had some colors and I looked at the screen and I had a theory and I had a model and so on. Therefore, I have the idea of a wave. But that's because I had the color, right? It's only because I had colors that I had the idea of waves, right? So I can't turn it back and say it's because of the waves that there are colors, right? So you can't, it's this necessary structure of your ontology that will weed out 99% of all the bad shit thinking that is out there. Because, as I said so many times recently, basically all philosophy in this realm is circular. It's semantically circular. It is putting the cart before the horse and all this, right? By saying, but it's a particular wavelength. No, that doesn't follow because wavelengths are something that arrives after color. So you can use that to explain something going on before color, right? Okay, so far so good.
An illusion is something that you experience, but does not correspond with states of...
No, but it's also a weird question, right? It's not dealing... What is color then? How does that fit in your ontology? They are taking a stab at a solution, which is, it's an illusion. It's sort of a bad question in the sense that you're handing a potential solution to the one you're asking the question, right? Ask the question, what the hell is a color in your ontology? Let them explain it, right? Then by handing over a potential solution, he's probably going to focus on whether or not that solution is good or not, and thereby avoiding actually answering the question about what is fundamental about color, right? So he's going to tell you about illusions possibly instead, right?
Of affairs beyond that experience. So if you see 18th century clipper flying in the sky, that's an illusion. You do have the experience of the clipper, but it doesn't correspond to actual states of...
Well, how do you know? How? I'm experiencing X. It's an illusion. Why? That must be based on reasoning. But reasoning comes after experience. You had to have some experience in order to reason. You wouldn't be reasoning if you didn't have experiences like colors and cognitions, right? If there were no colors, sounds, and taste and so on, or any elephants or tomatoes or cars or bicycles, you wouldn't be reasoning. So it's a lot of it's all circular. It's the same old circular semantic bullshit, right?
Affair in the sky beyond your experience of the clipper. That's an illusion.
I might point out that I think that what is meant by a clipper is a kind of ship, right? In the 20th century, a clipper was an aeroplane, actually. I think a waterplane. What were they called? Hydroplanes? These big ones, that could land on water. I think they were called clippers also. But They were 20th century, right? So, whatever.
A color is not that, because colors do correspond to actual states of affair by and large.
Actual states of affair? Holy shit, this is a problem here, right?
Sometimes they don't. There are color illusions, like that cylinder that projects a shadow on a chessboard. And
What? So sometimes it's an illusion. How do you know when it's an illusion? It's the old stick in the water thing also, right? Is it bent or is it straight? Well, if I see it bent, I will consider it bent. If it's straight, it's straight. I can't know. I can't get to whether it's straight or bent. Why do I have to decide on one of them, right? If I see a bent stick, well, if you only see in water and you see a bent stick, I could give you a bent stick that looks bent in the water and you would say it's straight, and then I put it out and it would be bent, right? As if you go into angles of bentness and so on. If I took a slightly bent stick and put it in water and you see a bent stick and you would say, aha, it's a straight stick. And I put it out and it would be bent. Would you say that it's not bent? Would you say it's straight? So it's this. You can't get to it. You can't get to this settlement. And he's also appealing to, but by and large, there's a correlation with the color in the mind out there. Yes, no, you can't get to that. You can't get to that because you needed to have some colors, you need to have some other qualia and some cognitions in order to start to theorize about which that comes before the colors. That's circular. That's why metaphysics is circular. It's just fucked up circular reasoning. I'm not buying it, right? You cannot get behind qualia. You cannot get to whatever it is that produces qualia, is responsible for qualia. It is a mindfuck kind of thinking, right? It is circular, as I pointed out repeatedly in recent videos, and not least the one prior to this one in the part 1 of this series here, right? It's and this by and large, well, is that because of sometimes colors are not the colors you see? But how would you know? So if it can be illusory, a color, you can't say that, okay, but now it's not illusory. Now I am supposed to have that color. But over there, when I have that color, it should be some other color because I've decided so. How did you get to that? Because you needed to have the color in order to say whether or not you should have that color. But then you can't turn it around on the same experience and say, I shouldn't have that color, I'm having the color off, right? It's this ground is paved with stupid circular arguments in this area of philosophy, right? Okay, talking about illusions. I would say that if you have a cognition or a, let's say, it's an appeal to the cognition you are having is not correct. That's an illusion, right? Or the placement or the causation of various concepts or cognitions, right, are not correct in order to compared to what you expect to be the case. Like the magician pulling a bear out of a hat or whatever, right? Pulling a fat rabbit out of a hat. There shouldn't be a rabbit in there, right? There's something wrong. It's an illusion because it shouldn't be possible to have that rabbit there, right? So rabbit combined with hat, combined with situation and, dimensions, whatever. There's something wrong with the combination of and what follows from what? From the cognitions. But it's not the color of the hat. It's not the color of the. It's not the smell of the rabbit. It's not the feel of the hat that is illusory. But it's the combination of the cognitions and the placement of them and how they behave that is illusory, because it goes against your theories of what should be possible to follow from what, and that's why you call it an illusion, right? In my opinion, that's my way to deal with the idea of illusions. But the point is, you can never get to whether or not it is an illusion, right? You can only say, I think there's something I have, my first impression here is not correct. I need to scrutinize this. I can't rely on somebody pulling rabbits out of hats. There seems to be something, I'm not trusting this or something. Fine. But you can't justify that I should or shouldn't be experiencing this, because you experienced it. There's nothing about your experience that can tell you whether or not you should experience it. Like if I'm experiencing elephant, I have the cognition of elephant. There's nothing about it that can tell me whether or not I should be experiencing it, right? But the illusion is, I have some preconceived theories and ideas and models and science and whatever, experiences and memories that tells me this is unusual, right? It's like if the first time somebody sees a flying plane, I thought it was impossible for, machines to fly. But apparently they can fly. But the first people who saw it might say, holy shit, am I seeing that? What? That is impossible. That looks like an illusion. It must be an illusion, right? But then they see another plane and another plane, and they get the explanation, because of, air and wing dimensions and whatever, right? That makes the thing go flying, right? And then they sort of, okay, I think that I accept that explanation, so no, it's no longer an illusion, sort of.
Causes you to perceive color in an inverted way. You think what's a dark square is a white square, and the other way around. And even when you are shown the illusion and you're convinced this is an illusion, you still see colors in.
No, but it's the conflation of direct experience with an imagined or abstract story about what should be going on. That's a violation of categories, I would say. You're taking a story and combining with what you experience. You should be experiencing this, says science, right? No. If you're experiencing a bent stick, you are experiencing a bent stick, right? I don't care whether or not you think it should be straight or what, right? I have to deal with a bent stick, right? And if I pull out the stick, well, then I'm experiencing straight stick, maybe, right? Okay, then I have to deal with straight stick. I can't say my experience is invalid, because then you would have to say that with all experience it's invalid, right? You can never know whether or not it would change into, and that's what Hume pointed out 300 years ago, that just because it used to be like this doesn't mean it automatically will be that way forever, right? That doesn't prove anything. You can't infer the past into the future as all these materialists do, right? It's the idea of the law of the universe, the laws of the universe, right?
In that illusory way. So yes, it can happen under certain circumstances that colors are illusions. But I wouldn't say simply that colors are illusions. Colors are always illusions. No, I think they do correspond to states of affairs in the world out there.
I think they do correspond. I don't find that to be a good argument, right? It's sort of very loose handling of the argument of an external world. I do think that there is. Okay, would you mind giving me the philosophy behind it? That thinking, would you give me the thinking? Because you're just giving me the solution. You're not giving me the thinking here, right? What is it about that experience of yours? Unless you think that it's already given to you somehow by some magical intervention and access, an idea of an external world, right? which is also, in fact, it's impossible to have an imagination of something that is beyond imagination, because imagination is also a part of the dashboard, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have access to it. So even an imagination is a part of the dashboard. So if you imagine something that is outside the dashboard, that imagination itself is a part of the dashboard. So you can imagine all you want. That imagination is still a part of the dashboard. Otherwise, you wouldn't experience it, right? Or you wouldn't have access to it. So the concept of the imagination doesn't, the idea of the imagination doesn't bring the content out there where you're imagining it to be. I can imagine, something on the other side of my wall here, right? But that doesn't make it so just because I have an imagination of it in here, right? And when you are dealing with these foundational levels of philosophy, it's even beyond all dashboard. That there is this world he's talking about, and this loose kind of, I think there's a good reason to think that that's not good enough made, right?
Corresponds to states that are out there and not in our minds, because colors are representations on the dashboard, and the movement of the dials in the dashboard do correspond with the dynamics of the states out there in the sky.
It seems to me he also mixes up the idea of cognitions and colors, right? Or everything, this dashboard to him is just one big pile of shit going on, right? But I think I have a sense that his meta-consciousness is somehow detached from the dashboard. And because it's meta-consciousness, it's sort of higher level thinking. Because it's higher level thinking, I can come up with ideas of what is before the dashboard, right? So he is going in, his meta-consciousness has become sort of an outside realm that is sort of thinking about things outside the dashboard. And thereby, by proxy, somehow, he's talking about an external world. I don't know, I'm just fabulating, right? And it's also, it's also an easy, it's the easy route, right? Just pretend that it's there. You don't need to argue. Just pretend, and people will follow, right? It's like just pretend that it just be sufficiently confident and throw PhDs and authoritarianism at them, right? I have PhD, therefore my thinking good, right?
Colors is precisely that. Now, under a different definition of illusion, then you could say all colors are illusion. If you say, if colors are only my mind and colors don't...
What he doesn't realize is, and I don't say, I guess he doesn't have to realize that, right? But that's not just my realization, that if you wind it back, you had a color, therefore you had an abstraction, then you have something you did and you changed the world, you took a bite of the apple, now that it's a different situation, you have a new experience, a new color, a new cognition, a new understanding, and so on. It goes in this sort of experiential circle of constantly changing, scenario, right? But the first time somebody had an experience, what was that? The ultimate first experience. What could that possibly be? Would that be a theory? The first thing that appeared in a mind, so to say? Would it be an elephant? Or would it just be a color? Or some kind of colorish blemish, right? I think it would be a color. In order to cut it short, let's just call it color, right? So the first time there was something you could be aware of, it would be a color. Maybe it could evolve into cognitions of like elephants, right? Or if you're taking an evolutionary, something in the Cambrian explosion, maybe, if we are delving into evolution, right? But then that cognition would be arriving because of the color, right? Now that color, why did that arrive? Well, if you are being aware of what is going on, the only thing you have to be you can possibly be aware of is the color and what follows from that color, being that cognitions and stories and even your meta consciousness arrives maybe because of the color, right? You can rule that out. So if you're saying that something beyond the color, you're basing on the idea of color, ultimately, right? So what is it about these colors that makes you say there's something beyond colors? Let me have it. Please, tell me, what is it about the colors that makes you say there's something beyond the colors, right? Please give me that argument. If you can't, then shut the fuck up on this metaphysics, right? It's bullshit.
Exist in the world out there, then they are illusions. Well, then yes, then colors are always illusions, because colors only exist in our minds. They are our representations of the world.
Yeah, but you just keep saying representation. What's the argument of the representation? How does it follow from these colors that they're representations? You didn't have what they're representing and then say, aha, see, that whatever it is before the colors is responsible for now their colors, right? You never had that access. You started with the colors. And at some point you became meta-consciousness and you became a Bernardo Kastrup that all of a sudden, out of nowhere starts to say, yes, it is based on something before colors. How do you get to it, right? How do you get to it? This is a very, very important step. It's such a large step that you can only downplay it. I can't express how huge a step it is without going into some kind of acrobatics here, right? And he just says, of course, yes, it is just there, right? That is lazy. That is what's the term? That when somebody is not aware of this, of the importance and significance of this, what's that called? When you're just you're oblivious to the significance of what you're actually arguing and the limitations of your argument. So yeah, let's carry on.
Created by us in our individual minds. Out there,
the other day I got this notion. I'm tired of saying there is no our and there is no we. Whenever somebody says our and we, I'm not going to, unless it's very significant for the actual thing they're dealing with in the moment. When they say our and we, I'm not going to comment on it because I'm sick and tired of saying there is no our and there is no we. It's this implied axiom he's working from about the problem of other minds that he just takes for granted by just saying our and we. And I let one slip also in that direction. Then that might also be a reason why I'm not going to comment on it, because it's also maybe just the limitations of language to some extent. So it is sort of futile to point it out, right?
if you see the redness of an apple, that redness exists in your mind, not in the apple out there.
Oh, the apple is out there. The apple. Really? You can't be serious, man, right? You can't be fucking serious. So he's still a materialist. He says the apple is out there. So he's an illusionist, isn't he? He is a materialist illusionist. Isn't it the same argument? The illusionist says the concept, the cognitions are out there, but you are experiencing colors in order to know that the apple is there. So the apple is there. You just have some illusory colors in order to make sure that you understand that there's an apple there, right? It's all this rabbit hole of Platonic ideals and forms, and that it goes haywire when people do this, right? He just said that the apple is out there. It's fucking crazy, right? He's just, nuking his own philosophy here.
Of an apple, that redness exists in your mind, not in the apple out there.
So, okay, I might give him a little slack here. If he says the apple out there, it cannot be the apple he's experiencing, he's cognizing. Right? It must be what that cognition supposedly represents out there, right? But both of them, both the colors and the tastes and the apple as a concept, is a part of your mind or a part of what you have access to. Otherwise, you wouldn't experience it, right? There's something that coalesces in how you cognize these things into apple or not, right? That's also why if you're going with the idea of an external world and there are other minds out there, so to say, that you communicate with using propositions, then you have to get to an idea whether they're true or false, that proposition, based on these cognitions. If you know there's an apple out there, you don't need to ask somebody else. That's the fucking problem with this materialism. People saying there is an apple, and if you disagree, there's something wrong with you, and you might as well go to the gulags, right? Because your mind is weird, right? I have objective reality out there. There's an apple. Fuck you, right? That's where it goes off the rails, this philosophy. The materialism. That's why Dr. Fauci can say you'd have to trust the science. Oh my God, science. It's objective. They know what is out there, so I have to trust it because somebody says so, right? It's bullshit.
Whatever corresponds to the apple out there, because the redness of the apple is a dial on your dashboard indicating something. Whatever corresponds to the apple out there, because the redness of the apple.
Okay, so he said whatever corresponds to the apple. So we have to be careful, right? Because if he says there's an apple out there, it sounds like he says the concept apple is out there. But now he says what represents the apple out there, right? It's balancing on this, semantic knife's edge. And where, are you talking about outside or inside now? It's like, you have to be fucking clear about this, right?
Indicating something. The real state of the sky, the thing that corresponds to the apple, is not accessible directly to us. Our access to it is always intermediated through the dashboard.
So how is it accessible? If it's not accessible directly, but how the hell is it accessible, right? Is it only accessible through your fantastic mind or what? How do I get to that external world? Tell me. Tell me how I get to that indirect access to that external world. Is it because of your theorizing about that dashboard? Well, then you need the dashboard in order to theorize. Well, you can't do that because then you're doing science about your dashboard, right? That's invalid. You can't use that science to go back and explain that dashboard. That is responsible for the science you created from that dashboard.
So if you say that colors are illusions because they're only in us and not out there, yeah, okay. Then under that definition of illusion, colors are illusions. But then they are at the very least very useful illusions because they still correspond with external.
Yeah, okay, so it's sort of the semantic game of what we mean by illusion. Yes, if the colors are not the thing itself, if you say there's the thing itself out there, yes, it's a kind of illusion, you could say. But, it doesn't give... It violates the normal everyday understanding of illusion, just like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, right? It's a cognitive illusion. What he's talking about is the Qualia is illusions. That's different, in my opinion. You have to be careful with these things. It doesn't matter what you call it as such. That doesn't change what it is. I can, if I have a Rolling Stones record, I call it a Beatles record. It doesn't change the music, right? It's still the same sound that comes from the groove in the vinyl, right? Or the compact disc. Right.
Objective states of affairs that aren't themselves colors, but correlate with colors very nicely in such a way that it's useful for us to have
Very nicely? Is that your philosophy? It correlates very nicely. How do you get to... You can't correlate things without having both the things you're dealing with, right? Correlation and causation, right? Now, correlation is not causation, right? So correlation in itself is not a good argument. That's on page 2 in philosophy and science, right? So if it's a correlation, how do you if you're correlating a meteor with extinction of dinosaurs, I'm just grabbing something, right? You're correlating that meteor with the extinction of dinosaurs, right? It's very abstract, but let's use that. That's sort of kind of simple, right? But you have the meteor and evidence of meteor, and you have the dinosaur and evidence of dinosaur, and you're trying to piece this together in sort of a causation, which is stronger than a correlation, right? Then you can discuss what is the difference between causation and correlation. I would actually very much like somebody to tell me the difference, right? If there's somebody who has an idea what the difference is, and when you can upgrade correlation to causation, maybe something about whether or not they touch or not, right? But when he says correlation with an external world, what evidence is he talking about of an external world? Because he doesn't have access to it. That's the foundation of his philosophy. It's a completely different paradigm. According to him, yes, he can say that he can imagine an external world, and he can imagine that it's a total different paradigm, but he cannot correlate it because that would entail that he has some insight into what the hell it is in order to correlate it and particular aspects of it. And that's why we go into this woo-woo mysticism kind of thing, where he goes into hardcore abstractions like ripples and so on, right? That you cannot possibly refute because he can make up whatever he wants.
Those illusions.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so go ahead, Kyle. I think the question is just yours here.
Okay. So it's about our consciousness. It falls into some traps of unreliability. One example is like if you have a stick in a cup of water, the stick is bent, right? But I guess a lot of people, Noam Chomsky uses this one too. Consciousness follows our cognition, and our cognition is unreliable. So what our consciousness tells us about the world is fallible and wrong, but that's different from saying that consciousness is fallible. So like when I see this bent stick, I see a bent stick in reflection, but it isn't actually bent. But then he'll state something.
How would you know that? If I'm sitting here, I have a big glass over there, and I see what I would call a stick, and it's bent. How would I know whether or not it's bent or not? Right? Because if I can only sit there and look at that bent stick, how would I decide whether or not it's bent or not? I can't. I can only see I am experiencing bent stick, right? If you've only ever seen that stick bent, it's a bent stick. But let's say you can pull that stick out of the water, but then it's no longer in the water. It's a new situation. You can say that's a straight stick or whatever shape the stick is, right? But is it bent? It's also this, is the light in the fridge turning off when the door is closed, right? I mean, you have to, you can't be two places at once, right? It's this sort of a relativity of it. You have to accept that if you have to extend your knowledge with your imagination or your theorizing or your science. That's why you're using science. Because you don't have full insight of what's going on. You can't be everywhere at once, right? So if you need to decide whether or not that stick is bent or not, that's up to you, right? If you need the stick to be in the water for things to work, right? You can't pull it out to check whether or not it's bent. You have to keep it in the water in order to have the effect of stick plus water, right? So you have to decide for yourself without knowing whether or not it's bent or not. So this thing about, I pull it out and look at it, oh, it's straight. Yeah, it was straight when you look out of the water, right? You can't stick it in the water and say, now it's straight. because it's bent now, right? Then you have to pull it out again, see it straight. Yeah, but it is straight, bent, straight, bent, straight, bent, straight, bent, right? You can't have one story overruling the other story, in my opinion, right? And if you do that, that's on you. That's your decision. It's not, you can't tell people you should think of it this way. Contrary to your understandings, it's an illusion, whatever, right? Because if you're appealing to illusion of your cognition, you can't trust any cognition then. Because you don't know if it's just the particular scenario. You have always seen this pig in that it always has 4 legs, this kind of pig. But it's just because you saw it in water. If you dragged it out of whatever scenario, it would have 10 legs. How would you know that? Because you haven't experienced it yet. If you have only ever seen sticks in water, you would say sticks are always bent, right? If you weren't able to pull them out of the water. These people can't argue, right?
I mean, like, however, all these psychological processes below the level of consciousness are constructing my experience of consciousness. We'll get into Chomsky in a little bit, but this is just a prelude to that.
Who the hell wants to bring fucking Chomsky, that commie dude? Who the hell is bringing that thing into? Why would you want that?
Perception is layered. We know that.
I can't help it now, right? We know that? Who the hell knows? We? Who are those we? The elite academia or what? Has decided we know that, and because we know it, you know it, peasant. Right? Just pay attention. Fuck off with the we knowledge, right?
Before.
And can you know about perception? It's an epistemological question in the sense that you need to do epistemology and define knowledge before you can refer to knowledge. When you say we know that, you are implying knowledge. But if you're not doing epistemology, what enables you to fabulate about knowledge? Right?
There is that experience that we call perception. There has been a lot of processing in our minds before that. We have already attached labels to certain subsets of the conscious experience. We have already attached narratives to it, explanations of origin. Sure. How is that possible? How is this the case? What will happen next?
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to point out at also, that when we are experiencing shit, we are putting it into a story very quickly of what is supposed to be understood. And that when somebody appears that we are not used to, we call it an illusion. Oh my God, it's a UFO. Oh my God, it's a flying machine. Oh my God, it's AI. Oh my God, right? Oh, it's sort of, when we're not used to it, it's like crying wolf or something like that, right? There's something weird over here, right? Oh, I've gotten used to the weirdness, so no, it's no longer weird, right?
So there is this layer of cognition. I think all these layers are mental. A physicalist would say the initial layers are purely physical before they get translated into a mental state.
Dude, you need to stop this rambling on the definition of illusions and so on. That's a red herring in the question, right? Go back to the starting point and say, what are we dealing with when we're talking about colors? That's much more important to deal with than whether or not you consider color an illusion or not, or whether the function of the meaning of the term, the semantics fits the description and so on, right? And the stories we're telling about how we are supposed to understand the bent or straight sticks. Color is very, 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 very important in my opinion, right? And Bernardo Kastrup's loose dealing with color, and particularly in this case, he extends his loose handling of the idea of color. It's just a weird phenomenon on my dashboard. It's not the real apple. It's just something there's an apple out there. That's much more important than the colors, right? It's sort of platonic in a sense, right? It's kind of, I'm sinking down in my chair, yeah, right? When I start to look like Jabba the Hutt with a shirt on, right?
At the end. I disagree with that. I think they are mental from the beginning, but I still think they are layered. because it's an empirical fact that perception is layered. There are experiments that can show that.
Okay, I think we'll stop here before the 1 hour mark. So I have 10 seconds left. Give me your comment, and otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.